This is Kate Swoboda, creator of YourCourageousLife.com, director of the Courageous Living Coach certification at TeamCLCC.com, and author of the book, The Courage Habit, which is available at booksellers and at Amazon. The Your Courageous Life podcast is all about going after what you want and creating and living a more courageous, emotionally resilient life. Might drop a couple of F-bombs, so maybe don't listen with your kids in the backseat of the car. And here we go with today's episode. Hey everybody, it's Kate, and today's episode is going to be all about giving you some practice with reframing fear. And I'm finally going to tell the story of how it is that we decided to move. And I've been alluding to this in prior episodes of the Your Courageous Life podcast, but I haven't told the whole story. And today I'd like to tell the whole story. And as I tell the story, use it as an opportunity to give really targeted examples of what it's like when you are practicing reframing fear, which is absolutely a skill that you want to get into, of course. Before I do that, I'm just going to say really quickly, number of times I tried to record today's podcast episode and failed, at least 3. So basically I started this morning and I kept getting interrupted by my kiddo. And one of the interruptions was her getting frustrated with some blocks and screaming audibly from the next room in frustration, just like, ah, and like crash. Then, she got mad and like hit the blocks and they went flying. And you could hear it in what I was recording, which was crazy. So I paused and I went and I, gave her the hugs and all that good stuff and let her know it was going to be okay, and got back to it with podcast recording, at which point then there were other interruptions and distractions. Oh, and then I tried yet again, and then my neighbor started what seems to be a very intense, very involved, and very prolonged session of leaf blowing. So I just wanted to share that because I think there's this misperception that maybe people have that if you have an online business and if you're seeing, things I post on Instagram and stuff like that, you're just thinking, her life hasn't been disrupted at all. And of course, a little bit of a inconvenience when you're trying to record something from noise happening around the house or from your neighbors is just part of life. And certainly it is not the largest inconvenience that one can have in the great scope of what we have going on. I'm recording this in the spring of 2020 at the time of COVID-19. And yet I just got to say, I have my struggles with getting stuff done too. So let's talk about that reframing of fear, really reframing anything, because the ability to reframe things is, in my mind, one of the biggest tools that you can have in your personal wellness toolbox. It is everything. And it's backed by clinical research. This is not, just some life coachy, throw the pom-poms in the air. Just think positive. It's actually a skill. It is called cognitive reframing, sometimes cognitive reappraisal in the psychological literature. Now I want to talk a little bit before I get into the move and the story behind that and giving you some practice with reframing fear, reframing those limiting thoughts that come up. I want to talk to you a little bit about conscious incompetence and unconscious competence. So, conscious incompetence, I was reading about this concept again in the very brilliant book Grit by Angela Duckworth. And if you want to learn how to become more gritty, somebody who has that tenacity to really make sure that you follow things through, or when you set your mind to change, you really are going, this is going to be different. Of course, you have to do things like commit and be willing. But there's this period that she describes in the book of actually being open to the fact that when you first start something, you will be consciously incompetent at it. Consciously, as in you're very aware of it. And with time and with practice, you become unconsciously competent. This thing that you used to be so aware of sucking at, you become better at. And then after a while, You even become unconscious to the fact that it's just what you're competent at. I wanted to point this out in part because in my book, The Courage Habit, I talk about creating courageous habits and how there are fear-based patterns that we're used to. And then we want to become more courageous people. So we need to learn how to create more courageous habits in our lives. Now, when you first start doing this, and this is related to today's episode because I'm going to be giving these examples of reframing fear. When you first start to do this, you will be consciously incompetent at it. Meaning that as you first start to reframe your thoughts, you're going to be aware, painfully aware sometimes, of sucking at it. This is the case with any skill you want to learn. You want to learn how to play the violin? You're going to suck at it at first. You want to become a life coach? You're going to suck at it at first. And in fact, that's one of the things that I'm the director of the Courageous Living Coach certification. You can learn more about that at teamclcc.com. And conscious incompetence is something, I don't particularly love the word incompetent, of course. Conscious incompetence is absolutely something that our trainees struggle with when they are first starting coaching, because they're so aware of how new and awkward and different it feels. It's like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this well? I don't even know. Like that overwhelm comes up. You can feel more aware of all the things that aren't going right at the beginning than you even do of the things that are going well, right? But after time, you develop what is called unconscious competence. It just becomes your default way of being. And I have to say that for myself, around reframing mental thoughts that just don't feel okay, limiting thoughts is how I often think of them, reframing fears, there is absolutely a period of very, very, very conscious incompetence on my own part. And what makes people gritty, according to Angela Duckworth, is that they decide that they are willing to be with this phase of conscious incompetence, this phase that is so painful of knowing that you're bad at something. So this means to me that if you want to live a more courageous life, I know it's been said before, but it's worth repeating, you are going to have to be willing to stumble. And I've said on multiple podcasts where I have been the one interviewed, and if you want to find all the many, many podcasts where I've been interviewed, you can search for Kate Swoboda podcast, and I'm sure you'll find things. But I've said many times that it's not you become more courageous and you identify what your fear patterns are, and then it's just like, cool, I won't do those anymore. It's actually more like you'll identify what your fear patterns are, you'll totally do them again, but you want to create a neural interruption so that the pattern doesn't just go on autopilot. In fact, I would argue that one of the things we got to consider is that most people are already unconsciously competent at their fear pattern. We assume, oh, I'm just such a perfectionist. You weren't born that way. That's a fear pattern. Oh, yeah, I'm such a people pleaser. No. You weren't born a people pleaser. You learned that pattern until you became unconsciously competent at it. Unconscious meaning you're not even thinking about it. You're very, very competent at the pattern. It's just not one that you want. So if you want to change any pattern in your life, you're going to have to change your thought patterns too. And I get it. At first, you start trying to do that, and it feels like every single negative thought that you've ever had is just like, well, here we go. It starts feeling like this is worse because I started looking at it. I don't even want to look at it. Well, you're not going to get anywhere in life doing that. I wish that were the case, right? I wish, we could just delay looking at the hard things in life and then boom, they just kind of go away. But it doesn't work that way. So let me tell you a little bit about this story of the move, which has become something of a complex story at the time of me recording this. So in my life, I do a lot of stuff. And I am one of those, I'm cool with the doing of a lot of stuff. I see the memes out there that just kind of assume that people who do a lot of stuff must be these empty shell people who have nothing in their lives except to-do lists. And I'm kind of like, I don't know who you're talking about, but I'm like, I want to read all the books, and I'm excited about that. I want to paint, and I want to learn languages. I want to travel. I want to try all the food. I want to meet people and give them hugs, and I want to have great conversations, and I want to teach my daughter how to read. I want to have the best sex ever with my husband, and I want to decorate our house beautifully, and I want to write books, and I want to, and I'm good with that. To me, none of that is like a hustle for like hungry ghosts and trying to fill my life with a bunch of activities because I can't, I'm doing the depths of the soul exploration as well. Who the hell am I? What makes me tick? What makes me feel fully alive? What are my values? How do I align with that? I spend a lot of time thinking about all of these sorts of questions. So here I am, and I am somebody, I like to do the stuff. So I just preface that just to say that I'm somebody, I do a lot of stuff. So I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I am a coach, I work with clients one-on-one, I write books, I have this podcast, the Craft of Coaching podcast, and then of course I'm the director of CLCC, as I mentioned earlier. We have a team of 10 different people helping to lead the program. We work with 50 plus trainees each year. They have individual needs because we're pretty important. We're pretty into, like, you're not becoming a coach and just learning a skill set rando. You are a whole person, and I don't just want to hand someone the skill set. I want to help people develop who they are and their way of being in the world. So it's a lot. And then here we are, and it's like, COVID hits, and I got the same time crunch issues that I know so many people are struggling with right now. So it would make sense to me if people were going, how is she not going crazy? And a number of people have even said to me, Kate, how are you not going crazy? Because you got a lot going on. And I think that part of the reason I'm not, just really sitting in a state of anxiety has a lot to do with a lot of the daily habits that I've put into my life, meditation being one of them. I started getting up earlier to make sure that I could honor self-care and have some time to myself. That's all a piece of the picture for sure. But, we've even had some financial stress hitting, some, shakeups in my husband's job, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm not inoculated from the stress. I don't think anyone is. I think everybody's having it hit in certain ways. I've had family members who have caught COVID. I have a sister who is a nurse. There are like things I'm worried about. I'm worried about some members of my family who maybe aren't taking shelter in place very seriously, all that good stuff. So I've got the usual amounts of stress. So what am I doing to manage all that, given the fact that, oh, hey, now there's this other thing, which is moving. So I've now recorded the part of this podcast episode where I tell the story of how we arrived at the decision to leave California like 5 different times, because it's complex and it involved a lot of different factors. And there are things that we wanted to change, that we tried to change, that we weren't successful at changing, we being my husband and I. And we're pretty conscious, intentional people. And at the end of the day, it was like there were things that we wanted around money and our money going farther because the cost of living just kept going up here. And we would change other things to make up for the fact that cost of living went up. And then yet again, something else would happen. And it was this feeling constantly of like the money comes in, the money goes out, the money comes in, the money goes out. The bills are paid, which is great. But it did get me looking around and going, is this the only place in the world we could live? And then maybe our money could go a little farther? So there was that. There was also a distinct lack of community that I was really feeling. And some of that has to do with parenting in the modern age. And those of you who have young kids who don't happen to be lucky enough to live on a nice little street or a cul-de-sac with kids of a similar age right next door, you aren't going to know what I'm talking about. But anybody who isn't that lucky is going to know. It's like scheduling appointments to do play dates. At least that has been my experience. And we thought maybe things will change when our daughter, leaves her daycare and starts kindergarten. Didn't see it change. We thought maybe we'll try this, maybe we'll try that. Well, maybe we'll try a dinner series with topics. Maybe we'll try da-da-da-da. It's just the culture of busy. It just did not feel relational. So then that became another thing. Then the fires that have been hitting California, oh my goodness. And even when a fire isn't hitting the area, the smoke, oh my goodness, so many things. So there are all these reasons, right? And I believe I've spoken in another podcast episode about, basically we put our house on the market. It sold in 5 days. We negotiated with the new owners that we could stay in our current home until a house that we are having built for us in Las Vegas, Nevada, was going to be complete. And that was all well and good. And then COVID hit. So COVID hits, and of course there's fear. And now it's like, okay, holy shit, we're moving during a pandemic. So there's fear that comes up with that. There were some shakeups at my husband's company. There's some fear that comes with that. There's, okay, the world economy is having difficulty. I run an online business, right? And granted, it doesn't depend on just one person, but there are a lot of people who are going to be experiencing economic difficulty. How's that going to go? And then, of course, there's now trying to homeschool on some level our 5-year-old, and she's an only child. I mean, those of you who have more than one kid, I know there are times where you really probably feel like, oh my God, 2 kids or more kids is like too much. But at least they have like the hope of playing with one another. I gotta tell you, my poor kiddo, she's so starved for kids her age right now. It's like me and my husband, that's all she's got at the moment. So that is another thing that's tricky. So here we are, and we're planning to move to Las Vegas, and I don't know what to tell you except something didn't feel right. Something started to just not feel right. Something just started to not feel right. I don't know why, but something started to not feel right. And at first I thought, yeah, it's COVID. Of course it didn't feel right. And just as time was going on, didn't feel right. And we just recently made the very difficult decision to tell the builder we're not going to take the house. And in essence, that means we don't know where we're living in a week. By the time y'all hear this, we'll be living somewhere, but I'm recording this like literally in a state of I have no idea where we'll be living. No idea. Like our stuff is going to be put into some shipping containers and sit in a storage facility, and we've got a couple Airbnbs lined up, but I don't know where we're going to be living. At this point, top contenders include sticking with Las Vegas, Nevada, and then actually we're checking out Austin, Texas. That's another possibility, but I don't actually know. Have no idea. Have no idea. So, okay, if you hear that, you're hearing, okay, like, wife, mother, runs a business, a lot of responsibilities, and whole house packed up and don't know where you're going to live. I'd be kind of panicky if you're thinking that. I've had my moments, but here's where we get into the practice of reframing fear. So let's make it really active. I'll go ahead and even get vulnerable and share some of the different things that have come through my head. Because again, courage is not about fearless. It's not that these things don't come to you. It's that when they come to you, when the fear-based thoughts come to you, you do something with them that moves you in the direction of more courage and more resilience. And for my money, that is reframing fear. And again, at first, I was very consciously incompetent at it. And it has only been with time that I've learned how to be unconsciously competent at it. So I'm going to share a couple things that have come up. So moving in general, probably the biggest fear. What if we go through all of this effort? We sell our California home, which we love our California home. I'm sitting in it right now and we love it in a lot of ways. What if we sell our California home and we are not happy in the new city? All that effort, moving to a totally new state, by the way, and we're not happy. It's like, what are you going to do? You pick up and move back to the state you just left? What, so these are the thoughts that I had coming up. So what if I'm not happy in the new city? Well, here's how I would reframe that. And as you're listening to these examples, consider for yourself, where do you worry that you can't make a certain move because what if you won't be happy? Where does that fear come up? What if I won't be happy? Well, here's what I know, okay? I have the power, this is my reframe, I have the power to be happy anywhere. I am not dependent on circumstance. That's the reframe. Because I know that across the breadth of my life, I have had not ideal circumstances happen. For instance, I've made far less money than I make now, and I've been happy. I've had crap clothes, and I've been happy. I've had people be mean to me, and it hurt, but I figured out how to be happy. It's like, think about your own life for just a moment. There have probably been things you've walked through, like the death of a loved one, where somehow at the funeral you had a belly laugh, or having a new baby and you're tired as can be, but there's still somehow joy. Or things in your life weren't going right, but there was something about taking your dog on a walk that just reminded you of what was most important to you. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I just go back to that over and over again, that I can be happy anywhere. I'm not dependent on circumstance. You don't need a certain set of circumstances in order to be happy. People can be happy even amid circumstances that are less than ideal. It really is true. So that's the first one. What if I'm not happy in the new city, new state? Well, I trust in my ability, and I trust it because I've done it before, not because I just trust, and it's like, blind trust, and I actually have evidence for this. And I think if you think about it in your own, whatever your own situation is too, there is a way to be happy anywhere. I'm not dependent on circumstance. Yes, obviously, good gravy, the internet these days. Obviously, if I had no food and no money and nowhere to live and no one who loved me and I was sick yes, that would influence my happiness. Of course it would. But I'm talking about if we consider that those basic survival needs are met, like, you're going to be fine. I can be happy somehow, some way, anywhere. I declare that for myself, and it is something that I've really worked on. And in my life, I have been like, I mean, this is going to date me a little bit, but like I don't have money for groceries, and it's like ramen noodles for 10 cents a pack and Campbell's soup for 50 cents a can. And in my adult life, I have done that, and I have been happy. True story. All right. Other fears that I've had. What if I can't afford it? It's like we were selling the California home and going to do this new home in Las Vegas. What if we can't actually afford that home? Like, what if, and this kicked up big time after COVID hit, and there was some shakeups at my husband's company and shakeups in my own business and things like that. Oh my God, what if we can't afford it and all that? Well, we'll figure it out. That's my reframe. Like, we'll figure it out, or we'll figure it out. We'll rely on others. We'll plan it in advance as best we can. But it's this thing that I have said in other podcast episodes on navigating an uncertain future. The uncertainty is always a fact of our lives. It is always a constant. We need to stop getting hooked into this idea that if only we do all the right things and have all the right behaviors, we're going to have a certain future. Because then we just feel betrayed when that future doesn't materialize. In fact, it's always uncertain, and one of the best gifts you could maybe give yourself would be learning how to navigate uncertainty. Really learning it. I mean, this is an opportunity in many ways. And speaking of reframes, that's another one that I give for this, fear of like, oh my God, I don't actually know what city we're going to live in. Jeez, like, I don't know. I don't know. Sitting here recording this now, I don't know. And so guess what? Here's my opportunity to learn even more about leaning into uncertainty. And I think that the me of a couple decades ago would have been like, this chick is so full of shit, which really would just have reflected my own lack of capacity around my own conscious incompetence, I guess you could say, around reframing. But sitting here today talking to you, I genuinely feel like it's going to work out somehow. I don't know how. I do believe that I want to trust my intuition. And when something about Las Vegas wasn't feeling right, I want to listen to that. I want to take a breather. There will always be somewhere, some other house, some way, somehow. I don't know how, but there will be something somewhere. And there you go. I mean, how do you do any better than that? That is as good as it is. You can't control it. And if you can't control it, and if the future is uncertain, then I don't know how anybody does any better than you look around at the circumstances, you ask yourself what you want, you don't get roped into being realistic, you try to think outside the box, and then you accept what you do and don't have control over. There it is. Other fears that came up around moving. What if we live next to awful neighbors? You know what I mean? It's like that, like, what if you live next to those neighbors that have the dog that's just constantly barking and you try to go over and big smile on your face and you're like, hey, just wanted to, let you know while you've been at work, dog's been barking and I work from home and, and then get those neighbors who are just like, well, that's what dogs do. They bark. Oh, sweet Jesus. I work from home, by the way. That conversation had to have it more than once. And by the way, if any of your neighbors are knocking on your door telling you that your dog is barking all day, and it's not, I'm sorry, it's not, will dogs bark? It's actually, you need to do something about it, because if I can hear it in my home with my windows closed and stuff, it's a problem. So, what if we move next to awful neighbors, obnoxious neighbors, stuff like that? That's always a concern. Well, opportunity again to work on my conflict management skills. Or another opportunity would be to become one of those people who just don't even notice and totally let things go. Because I know y'all exist and I aspire to be like you when it comes to things like dogs barking, but I haven't gotten there yet. So a reframe for me around the fear of, oh my gosh, what if we do this big move and then we end up next to awful neighbors? It's like, okay, how might I become, I don't know how yet, but how might I explore becoming one of those people who just doesn't really notice when people are loud or obnoxious or whatever? How do I shift that internally for myself? And then, of course, there's also an opportunity to stand in my boundaries, because it's actually not okay to me to be paying for my little patch of land over here and have to hear and deal with the stuff going on somebody else's little patch of land, or, however you want to frame it. I'm not paying for what they're doing and they're not paying for what I'm doing. Let's be respectful neighbors. And there's a way to stand in that boundary too. I have had fears around the heat. I mean, my goodness, the number of times my husband and I have told people that we were going to move to Las Vegas, and the first thing people say is, oh my God, it's so hot there. Oh my God, it's so hot there. And then when we start floating around the possibility of Austin, it's also the other thing people say, oh my God, it's so hot there. And it's like, okay, so then I start going, so many people are saying this. Geez Louise, what if the heat is too much? What if it is just more than I can possibly tolerate? And here I am, and I don't do the snow, but oh my God, the heat. It's like, hold on, Kate. Stop, pause, reframe. Seriously, you guys, it's not about the thoughts don't start to go into your head and spiral of, oh my God, what if this and this and this happens? It's about stop, pause, reframe. You know how in grade school for fires, they teach you stop, drop, and roll? I'm like, how about for emotional fires? Everybody learns stop, pause, reframe. Just like you have to stop going down that path and pause, take a breath, and then consciously reframe. And yeah, at first you're probably going to suck at it, to come back to this conscious incompetence concept. So at first, whenever I tried to stop, pause, and reframe, it would have been, this is such BS. This is just this sparkly, glittery, happy crap. I'm not into that. I want real. Give me what's actually true. Don't BS me. That's just, it's just these happy people who are naive and out of touch with reality. And, and I had this whole thing, really kind of this uber logical, I'm too cool for school thing. But it wasn't getting me anywhere in my life. And I got to tell you, this is life-changing. It's like, okay, so what is within the circle of my control? How do I stop, pause, reframe? Okay, I want to reframe this. Here are the things that I would like to be happening. I don't want to just automatically default to being realistic. And then what is and isn't in the circle of my control, and anything outside of the circle of my control, the opportunity there is for acceptance. You aren't going to control how other people behave. You aren't going to control coronavirus. You aren't going to control the economic situation. You are not going to control whether people shelter in place. You aren't going to control how people vote. You aren't going to control whether or not the world's elected leaders actually know anything about how to lead. You won't control any of those things. But what you are empowered to control is where you place your intentions, where you place your attention, and whether or not you react or respond. And to me, deciding to consciously reframe my fear is a way of responding to the fear rather than reacting to it, reacting. It is hard to do at first. You will be consciously incompetent, and that is okay, because it's not about feeling that discomfort now. It's about where you want to be. So here's what I know to be true when I reframe, and you can take any of these reframes that you like, try them on, be willing to be consciously incompetent at them so that you can be unconsciously competent after enough practice. Reframe, what if I'm not happy, into I am the one in charge of my happiness, and my happiness is not dependent on external circumstances. Reframe, what if we can't afford it, as I will figure it out, or I will find ways to rely on others, or I will plan as best I can for any unexpected circumstances. That's it. You can reframe, what if we live next to awful neighbors, / what if at the new job the coworkers suck, / what if I break up with this person and then in the next relationship they don't treat me right, / I don't even want to, deal with my in-laws because what if they're not nice? It's like, okay, all the circumstances with people who can be disagreeable or difficult, reframe. This is an opportunity to get better at conflict management. Reframe. This is an opportunity to learn more how to let things go. Reframe. This is an opportunity to stand in my boundaries. Consciously reframing your life. It's not denial. It's not pretending. Isn't it a fact that if I move somewhere and my neighbors suck, that it's an opportunity for me to try to work something out so that everybody can be happy? I mean, isn't that a fact, that that's a possibility that's there? It's not lying to yourself. Well, what if I'm not happy in the new city? Well, I can be happy anywhere. Isn't that a fact? I mean, if you really think about that, isn't it true that most of what does make you happy, again, I know there's always the people who are going to pop in and point out like the absolute most awful suffering circumstances, and how can you neglect to mention those cases here? But I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking to people who have enough privilege to be able to listen to a podcast, okay? So assuming that you have enough privilege to be able to listen to a podcast, one that's trying to help you to be happier and more courageous in your life, by the way, isn't it true that really your happiness is mostly about what's happening between your ears? It's mostly tied to how gentle you are with yourself and others, how compassionate you are with yourself and others, where you place your intention, where you place your attention, and whether or not you respond or react. And when you react, you are probably reacting from a place that is not grounded, and it probably is not going to give you the best results. But when you slow down a bit and are willing to go, okay, what's my intention here? This is part of reframing. My intention is to live a happier and more courageous life. This is my personal intention in life. So reframing, okay? Where you place your attention, Well, let's see. If I have the opportunity to reframe, I'm the one who's in charge of whether this is like, oh my God, it's such a disaster, or hey, it's an opportunity. And responding and reframing and slowing down to reframe is inherently a response. So, here we are, and I'm recording this amid spring 2020 COVID-19 crises, and I see the stuff happening online of people saying, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to cut what you don't like from your life. It's an opportunity to slow down. And then I see other people like, how dare you say it's an opportunity? It's awful, and it's this, and it's that, and it's like, hey, you get to choose what you want to make this time mean. You get to choose what you want to make this turmoil mean. I look at it like this, and maybe my perspective will change with time, but currently I look at it like this. That I'm aware of, there has never been a society in existence that has not experienced difficulty. So if there has not been a society in existence that has not experienced difficulty, then we're not being dealt some kind of unfair hand here. There are aspects of it that might feel unfair, but just because they feel unfair doesn't mean that they actually are. They just are. Pandemics have been part of life forever. People get sick. It's what happens. And that doesn't mean that I'm negating the suffering that comes with it. I'm proposing that only to put it into a kind of perspective. Like, let's just slow down for a second, put it into perspective. People have dealt with what you've dealt with before, and they have come through. So use that, reframe that fact, and use it as your evidence that somehow you can come through. People have come through hardship with less. I am sure you can find examples of that. That's not a guilt thing. That's not like, oh my God, so why are you complaining? That would be so unkind. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you give yourself a gift when you remember that your ancestors who have come before you have really been trying to pave the way for something for you. And isn't that what you're doing now? You're living for in the moment, but you're also hoping for a better future for all. How about you create that better future for yourself? Because that's part of how you are more emotionally resilient. Practice reframing fear. Now, if you'd like some more help with that, of course, The Courage Habit is my book. You can check that out. The Courageous Living Program, totally updated and on a new platform. I'm so excited to share it. You can find it at yourcourageouslife.com/courageous living program, or just go to courageouslivingprogram.com and you should find it. But beyond that, even, you can get free help by heading to yourcourageouslife.com/begin. And that will make you a member with access to the Your Courageous Life library, free worksheets, audios, things you can download. You can follow me on Instagram, instagram.com/Kate Courageous. Read the blog posts. Just consider this time as like, this is my school to really understand. It's like I'm going back to school, people, so that I can really understand who I am, what I'm about, what it means to live a courageous life for me. And that is my aim on social media, is to really provide a place where people are going, I hadn't thought about it that way before. Maybe something's possible for me that I hadn't anticipated or considered. Somehow we are going to make our way through this, and I know that this is hard stuff. But the more you are willing to see this as an opportunity for you, or to find the opportunities inherent even amid hardship, the more resilient you will be, the grittier you will be, the more courageous you will be, however you want to put it. Be willing to be consciously incompetent and make it to the other side of that discomfort. With time, the reframes will start to feel automatic. You will not have to toil over them and go, well, okay, hold on, let me slow down. What could a reframe? It'll just be like, oh, wait, hold on. Maybe this is the possibility. I promise You know, Kate from 20 years ago would have been like, no way, but I promise that this is a possibility for you. All right, that's today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You know you can continue the work and the fun if you want to. Head on over to yourcourageouslife.com/begin and become a Your Courageous Life subscriber, because as soon as you sign up, you get access to an entire library of worksheets and audios and other bonuses. And of course, you'll be receiving more courage in your inbox. And who wouldn't love that? You can learn more about the Courageous Living Coach certification at teamclcc.com. You can get the Courage Habit at your local bookseller, on Amazon, wherever you like. We can even connect on social media. I'm on Facebook at Your Courageous Life. So look for facebook.com/Your Courageous Life. And I'm on Instagram as Kate Courageous. And I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. So here's to you, using these courageous tools in your life and creating a real ripple effect of good. And again, thanks so much for listening. I love it that you're here.